Hey, I'm Justin Sunseri. Welcome to Stuck Not Broken. In this interview episode, I have Erick Cloward, host of the Stoic Coffee Break podcast. We're connecting Stoicism to nervous system regulation. Even more specifically, loving your fate and self-regulating. It's a long and deep chat, so let's get right into it as Erick defines what loving your fate actually means.
All of the things that happen to us are going to happen to us. And so rather than complaining about those things, we should learn to love those things because they're going to happen anyway. And whether you like it or not, the universe is like, I don't care. It's still going to happen to you. And really what it's kind of a counter to is the idea of a just world fallacy. So people think that the world operates in some type of fairness or balance, that you get the things you deserve or don't get the things you deserve. And a lot of that comes from Christianity and other religions. Like, if you're faithful, then things will be good for you. And if you're unfaithful, then bad things will happen to you. But even Jesus Christ said, it's like the rain falls on the wicked as well as the good. And what he meant by that was, you could have an evil farmer out there and the rain's going to fall on his crops just as much as it's going to fall on the crops of the people who are righteous. And so in kind of countering that is just saying that the universe happens. And that's really hard for a lot of people to accept, because they want to think that, oh, if I'm a good person, then only good things will happen to me. And this is, the Stoics recognize that that's simply not the case. And their whole point was that you should be a good person no matter what. And that good things, bad things are going to happen to you. And you can either hate them, which is just going to make it, in a way, doubly worse, because the bad thing happened to you, and then you hate the bad thing that happens to you. So now you're in a bad mood about the bad things that happen to you.
Right.
So if you learn to accept those things and simply appreciate them, because that's just part of life, life is going to have struggles and challenges, then you can approach them with a much better attitude, a much better perspective, because there's nothing you can really do about the things that happen.
So is it like tough to get over it? is that love your fate?
I think, if that's what works for you, then yeah. I think that some people
It might
some
show
people
up
need
as
that,
okay.
Yeah, but I think that some people almost kind of need that. That's the way that their brain operates. Is just, it's like, well, it's like, what did somebody once say? Life's like a shit sandwich. Sometimes you either eat it or you starve. And it's that same idea of you can't control any of these things that are happening outside of you. You can only control how you respond to them.
To me, it could be I could hear it as tough, get over it, or actually embracing, and I'm not sure what love would mean in this context, but actually embracing it and being okay with whatever life brings you. Those seems to be like two very different manifestations or presentations of love your fate. Is that, could it show up as either one or something else?
Yeah, I think it could show up as either one, or, but I also think that tough to get over it. Um, if that's how you operate and that's where you need to start from, that's not always the worst place to be. It's kind of like one of the exercises I do with some of my coaching clients, and I do it in my course. Is that I have people sit down and write down all the things they don't like about themselves. And that sounds really weird, because a lot of people, it scares them. They're just like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. And I came up on it because I got in a huge fight with somebody they cared a lot about, and I was having a hard time getting over that, and I couldn't figure out why. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but it wraps around. And then I realized that they'd hurt me really badly, and I was like, okay, but why does it matter so much, and why can't I let go of this? And so I really thought about that. I was trying to understand where that anger was coming from, and what I recognized was that I needed their approval to feel okay about me. And I was like, okay, so why do I not feel okay about me? What is it that I need their approval to feel that I'm okay? And then I was like, because I'm not a very good person. Okay, that's an interesting thought. Why do I think I'm not a very good person? And I was like, I don't know. Let me figure this out. So I wrote down everything I didn't like about myself because I wanted to know.
Okay.
And when I got to the end of it, I was like, okay, there's nothing that's really that bad in here. I mean, I have, this is stuff that my friends deal with. And I realized that I could accept everything I didn't like about myself, even if I didn't like it or didn't love it. I could just go, okay, this is who I am. And it was just basically it's facing reality. So oftentimes when I do that with my clients, the reason why I start at the acceptance level is because we always hear, you should love yourself,
Right.
and that's if you struggle with self-esteem or you haven't faced these things that you don't like about yourself, then loving yourself feels like an impossibility. It feels like, when somebody says, do these affirmations and it'll help you out. And it's like, but if you don't believe the affirmation is true because your sense of who you are, then you're never going to get to that point where you truly feel like you can love or even like yourself. So my first step is, hey, just accept yourself.
What is it? Okay,
That's
so
it.
bring this back to loving your fate. How does accepting yourself connect to loving your fate?
So basically, the idea is if you have to start off with tough, get over it, and that's your baseline of like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm going to at least start there, and then it's like, okay, I don't really like this, but I can get through this,
Yeah.
or hey, you know what? This is the thing that's teaching me how to be a better person. This thing that I thought was so awful and so terrible, or I was so upset about, it's really something that I can learn from. And that's kind of the deeper meta level of that, is that oftentimes the worst things that happen to us are the most important things because they're the things that really teach us who we are. They strengthen us. I mean, how many times have you had a heartbreak that you thought this is the end of the world, only to
Right.
mend and heal from that, learn how to forgive that person for breaking your heart, and then be more open the next time you're in another relationship. And that's why loving your fate is so important, because if you stay in that bitterness about the things that happen to you, then you're just going to be a bitter person. And so if you can learn to love those things that happen, if you can learn to love the fact that somebody broke your heart and you've learned how to forgive them and learned how to heal from that, and it sometimes that cracking of your heart actually opens you up to something deeper. You feel those deeper emotions, you feel that grief, you feel that sadness, and rather than pushing that away or running away from it, you embrace it and you go, yeah, I want to feel sad about this sucked, and I want to feel that sadness for a while, and I want to sit in this for a little bit, and then that gives you more empathy for other people who are going through those things.
Hang on to that. I want to come back to that, okay? The embracing your emotions. But
Yeah.
for now, just the idea of loving your fate. Could we understand that as accepting reality, accepting fate, embracing what has been and how you've changed or benefited or whatever from what has been in the past? Is that kind of
Oh, absolutely.
all that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
encompassing in love your fate?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to it. I mean, so the Stoics have this idea that the only good in the world is living a life of virtue. It's
What is
not wealth.
hold on,
It's
what
not.
does virtue mean? I want to pause here. Like this is something I struggle to wrap my mind around. What is
Okay.
virtue in your own words?
So virtue, according to the Stoics, and just what I've kind of
Yeah.
realized because of studying these things for so long, it consists of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. So wisdom, it is not just knowledge, but the ability to look at a situation and make wise choices, figure out what's the right thing to do here, what's the prudent course of action. Uh, Courage, stepping up to fear. If you aren't put in situations where you actually have to face fear, then you never have to test your courage. If something's not scary for you, you see these cliff divers who are like, jump off these cliffs, or base jumpers, or crazy things like that. And for them, they're just like, yeah, it's really not that scary. Well, that doesn't take courage if it's not scary for you. It just means that there's something that you can do.
So it's like
So you can't.
embracing challenge.
Yeah, I mean, you can't develop courage if you're not facing something you're afraid of, because then there's no fear involved. Justice, meaning fairness to all people. It's not just about laws. It's about what is fair to everybody around you. So it's about being kind and compassionate to people, even if they don't like you or you don't like them. You still treat them well because that's who you want to be, not because of what they did. And then temperance is finding that balance between all of those things. And the way I like to describe temperance is it's putting enough, it's appropriate energy, appropriate task at the appropriate time, and no more, no less. So it's learning how to find that balance in your life. And the thing is, they're all interconnected with each other. They're self-reinforcing. So if you develop one, it helps you to develop the others as
How
well.
so all that equals virtue. Okay. How does something in my readings of Stoic, Epictetus and Seneca and whatnot, the living in alignment with nature. No, I do want to bring all this back to Amor Fati at some point, but now I'm just kind of
Hmm.
curious. Living in alignment with nature, how does that seems to be central to everything as well, like present moment. To me, I interpret that as natural present moment connection. That's kind of where my mind goes to. How does all that combine with virtue? Is that like underneath wisdom and
Yeah,
temperance and whatnot?
yeah. I mean, yeah. To me, I see them as all intertwined. It's not like you can just. Even though we put them in neat
Right.
categories so our brains
Yeah,
can
yeah.
handle it, they all overlap so much. And the Stoics, for them, living according to nature was one, again, accepting your fate, like this is what's happening. So live within what is happening, and rather than resisting everything that's happening, learn how to flow with it. It's kind of like like a kayaker or a surfer. The water is moving where it wants to move, and you can either flow with that water or you can resist against it and end up getting drowned. And the more you fight what's going on, and the more you go against what is happening, rather than figuring out, okay, this is what's happening. How can I move within that? You're going to save your strength. You're going to be much more effective in everything that you do. And so they also, for them, living according to nature is the idea that we are, we're social animals. So
Yeah.
being social and being part of community is part of living according to nature. Rationality. As human beings, we are rational beings. And so because we have rationality, then we need to use our rationality. It's kind of like we have this gift that other animals don't have. So that's something that we should use because it's part of our nature. Also, understanding part of your nature is part of what your role in the world is supposed to be. And that doesn't mean like, you're like a caste system or something like that. But it's the idea of what are you good at? What can you contribute to the world? What are you giving back into nature as well? Because you are part of it, not just this. We often feel like we're removed from nature in so many ways, and we look at his nature as a thing to be conquered and all of these things. And they're like, no, 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 we're all part of this. We're all part of this giant ecosystem. We might be the apex predator on top of that, but we are part of nature.
How does this all connect back to? You actually kind of mentioned it already, but how does this come back to loving loving your fate, accepting the present moment?
What it comes down to is the idea that virtue is the sole good is that within every situation, you ask yourself, am I being wise? Am I being courageous? Am I being fair? Am I being balanced? Am I, not pushing too hard or not putting in enough energy into these things? And that helps you to approach everything that comes your way in a much more reasoned, much more calm manner because you have a checklist, if you will, or a filter that you can look at everything through. What's the wise decision in this case? And wisdom would tell you that if there's something that's out of your control, stop trying to control it. See what you can, figure out what your response to it is and do that thing.
So this is where my mind goes. I want to come back to the question of how loving your fate can look. In this podcast, we talk a lot about. Actually, I came on to yours. We talked about polyvagal theory and autonomic nervous system and how it shows up in different states like safety, flight, fight, shutdown. It seems to me like embracing, accepting your fate, maybe loving it, appreciating the past, no matter what it was. Um, that can have like different hues or tinges or flavors to it. So someone who's in like shutdown, who's really collapsed and depressed and numb, loving their fate can look like it is what it is. Oh well. And like that might be the starting point. Someone who's in fight might be like, F it, here's my fate, let's go. Someone in who has more of like the safety, present moment connection might say, yeah, this is what it is. Here's the river bringing things to and from my, or just, washing down the river in life that I can and cannot control. And I get to witness it and be a part of it. And it is what it is. I'm not sure what an anxious person, how that would sound, but I think we get the idea. Like, there's all of these could kind of look like Amor Fati, or at least a starting point toward it.
Yeah. I mean, I think for an anxious person, where Amor Fati can be helpful is that you are better able to let go of the past and start worrying less about the future and trying to be much more in the present moment, because you can't control the past. It's already happened. You can't necessarily control the future because it's unknown. And as much as you might want to control some kind of outcome, you can only control what you do in the moment. You can only control your effort, your energy, choices, and the outcome is going to be what it's going to be. And so for an anxious person, letting go of what you want an outcome to be, I think is a huge thing. That's something that I have to do because I get anxious about things, and I just go, okay, well, the only thing I can do is what I can do and let the end be what it's going to be.
Is that dismissive though of like, people have like real issues, right? Is that just like, oh well.
Sure. The way that I do it is I try to pay attention to the story that I'm telling myself. And because that's really where the anxiety comes in. And so it's looking at the thinking, it's that metacognition of, okay, what story am I telling myself about this thing? Am I projecting forward that you know, if I run out of money or I get fired from my job, what does that mean? And what am I going to do about that? Or what story can I work through to actually to do that? About 20 years ago, this actually happened to me. I stumbled on a Stoic practice, which I didn't know was a Stoic practice because I didn't know about Stoicism at the time. I was working for a startup company and come to find out later that the president of the company had been embezzling money, but they kept bouncing checks. So I had 5 paychecks in a row that got bounced, and then I would get all kinds of fees, and they would pay for them, which was fine, but obviously it doesn't help, and caused a lot of distress. And there was one time where I had like $17 to last me for a week, and I was just, I've been divorced for a while. It was expensive. There was just a lot of things with that, and I was just really struggling, and I was almost had like a little bit of a panic about it. And then I thought, okay, but what's the worst that could happen? What is it that I'm telling myself? I'm like, okay, you know, if I can't, lose this job because the company goes under and I'm not able to find another job, then what does all of this mean for me? And I was like, okay, what if I wasn't able to find another job and I got kicked out of my apartment? Okay, well, I can move back to Salt Lake because I have family there. That would suck because I'd miss my kids, but I could do that. Could I live in my car? And I went through, the possibilities of that. I had a gym membership that only cost me $49 a year. So I could go shower there. And, like I walked myself through that worst case scenario. And then I realized that, yeah, I'd survive some way or another. I'd figure my way through this, and it never came to pass, and I was fine with that. But by figuring out what the story was that I was telling myself, that, oh my gosh, I'm going to get kicked out of my apartment, and all these terrible things are going to happen, I sat down and I said, okay, but what happens if that does happen? How can I? What would be the worst thing that could happen, and what could I do to mitigate those things? And walking through that exercise, I was like, okay, and it kind of took away that fear, and that fear of not having enough money, dissipated over that. And yeah. And then later on, I found out that was what premeditatio malorum is, the premeditation of evils, which is where you sit down and you go, okay, what's the worst things that can happen in this situation? So I'm ready for those things that can happen. And not in a worrying sense, but in a just an objective, remove your judgment around it, take out the emotions if you can, and think about those things. And then it lessens that fear because you've already faced them.
When it comes to loving your fate, thinking about things that may happen, that's actually a Stoic practice I picked up, was intentionally thinking about the future and what emotions it may cause, and just letting myself feel those emotions. Um, is that in conflict with loving your fate? Should we? I honestly I don't know. Should we be letting the future and the present come as it is without trying to make it be something else or feel something else? Is it loving your fate to think about the future and what if this and what if that versus just being in the present and whatever happens in the future happens?
I think it's a bit of a balance because if we go with the idea that you know, we ignore the future and we're 100% present, then we don't plan for those things. If we're always in the moment, 100% doing what feels good, what feels right, and so on, then we can cause ourselves a lot of harm. It's like it may feel great to drink 3 or 4 whiskeys that night, but tomorrow you're going to feel the the effects of that. And so so be good to your future you by planning that and keep it to two. you know and so I think it's and that's where temperance comes in. It's that balance of being present, looking towards the future, learning from the past, with a more gentle touch, I guess, and stop trying to sculpt the future into something we want, and be grateful and happy for what unfolds. One of the things that I just did an episode yesterday that I posted, and one of the things that I realized is that we try, and it was talking about over optimizing and productivity. We ha- try and be super productive all the time, and we never really give ourselves times to just be and to just enjoy. And if our life is too planned out and too prescriptive, then we miss the happy accidents of life. And
It's the
so,
balance of it. So that would be the
yeah,
temperance piece of a virtue. Yeah, I can
yeah.
relate to the overproductive. Um, I have to budget in time for. I'm pretty good at like spontaneous mindfulness and present moment connection. I'm pretty darn good at that. But recently, I've been like, uh, I need to budget in time for actual deeper reflection and meditation.
And it's almost like it becomes an addiction, because then
Yeah,
we look at every moment as something that needs to be scheduled, rather than looking at
yeah,
that free time as something that can just be. And people even, it's like they track everything. They track, their meditation, they track every single walk, they
yeah.
track, all their food. And it's like all of this over optimizing your life is just like, do you really need to do all of that? It is, and also just that's more and more data that you're creating. And do you need that much data? And does it really improve your life? And
Right. Well, it's yeah. To me,
then,
the energy, the intent, the anxiousness, the motivation you're putting into tracking will, like, what are you missing out on? And I think there are spontaneous little moments of mindfulness. It's always there. We could always look up at the sky, and I'd rather do that than look down at a spreadsheet to track, something.
yeah, yeah. I remember there was one comedian. I wish I could remember his name, but it was pretty hilarious. He just like he's about our age, or at least my age, and he was talking about. It's like, yeah, when I was a kid, we were forced to be mindful. And he's like, because when we were at the bus, we had to wait for the bus. When we
Yeah,
waited for our parents to pick us up from school, we had to wait for our parents to pick us up from school.
it had to be
There were no
where, yeah,
phones. There were no
no,
things. It's like we were just naturally mindful. It's like when summer came, there were a few programs on TV, but we were outside. We were just doing things. We had to be mindful. We didn't have a choice.
yep. I was just talking to my son this morning. I was walking into school. I wanted to. I love walking into school, but this morning I was feeling a bit rushed, and so I was like, "We should drive. I want to make sure I'm at home on time to do whatever." And he's like, "Really? I like walking with you." And I just thought about it for a moment. I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. I can do this. We're good." So we walked to school, and we were talking on the way over there about how I grew up with friends in the neighborhood, going outside. And like, yeah, we had video games, but we were outside constantly just playing. And
Yeah.
it's very different. He could do that, but I think it's not as normal now for kids to knock on a door and say, "Hey, can so and so come out and play?" I don't think it's
Yeah.
as normal anymore. Anyhow, all right. So Amor Fati, how do you get there? It seems like I can't tell if Amor Fati or if loving your fate is a technique, a practice, or the outcome of other practices. To me, I lean more toward the second, where it's a point we get to versus a thing we execute. You know what I mean? What do you think?
Um, I think it can. I mean, I think it can be both. I think it can be aspirational. That's an idea that we want to keep in our minds. That if we can look at everything that happens and figure out what we can learn from it. So I think that it's kind of like that's the idea, and then you work on the implementation of it. At least that's the way that my brain works. I think for me, one of the greatest examples of this, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it was an interview with Stephen Colbert and Anderson Cooper. And Anderson was talking with him because Stephen had mentioned one time that his mother dying was the worst possible thing that could happen, yet he found such great joy in that grief. And it just seemed like such this push pull thing. And he was just, and he talked about how, it was so terrible and so hard for him, but it was also one of the greatest things that happened because it opened up, he said, it just opened up this depth inside me that was really, really hard, but I didn't chase away that grief because I loved her so much. And so it was that understanding of kind of opposites. You need great grief to understand great joy at the same time. And, and so he wasn't mad that she died. He was sad and grieving and stuff like that, but also joyous about her life and everything that was there. And rather than, cursing the gods or whatever that his mother passed away, it was just a joyful reflection on her.
You mentioned earlier about and asked you to hold on to it. It was about the importance of recognizing, I think, processing, being with your emotions, and I wholeheartedly agree. Um, but I would definitely love to hear your take, the Stoic or the Stoic take, if it's different. The Stoic take on the importance of emotions. I personally don't read into the Stoic text that emotions are unimportant or should be stuffed down. Instead, it seems like, yeah, they're there. Let's pay attention to it, but how you react to it is different.
It's about not letting your emotions overrule you, and that's where that balance comes in. They're not
Yeah.
like, hey, don't feel emotions, because you can't necessarily choose whether or not you feel something, but you
Right.
can choose how you respond to those things, and you can choose what kind of story you're telling yourself. You can decide what things you're going to let bother you or not, or if they bother you, you can decide how you want to respond to those things. And Marcus Aurelius, throughout Meditations, often talked about the emotional struggles he was having. He was not a closed off person. He talked about, the emotions and the grief and the sadness that he was dealing with as well. And it wasn't like, and so when people misread Stoicism because it's focused on rationality, it's that rationality is that counterbalance to our emotions. So that's why there's a focus on there, because you don't need to work on feeling emotions. You're going to feel those. But what you do need to work on is how you respond to those emotions. So that's why there's a bit of a focus on there. But then people, like they do, like to take it to extremes and go, oh, see, it's all this or it's all that. And it's like, no, it's not all one thing or the other. This is just we're so heavily weighted on our emotions. Stoicism adds that counterbalance, so everything flows a lot easier. But for some people, they see it as, I don't like these pesky emotions. I'm going to squash them down as best I can. And as we know, when you squash down your emotions, that leads to all sorts of, repression, which finds its way out in other ways.
Yeah, very much. I mean, the word stoic is associated with unemotional.
Yeah.
My clients will say that they are being stoic or being strong, and so it's become associated with repression or you know minimizing or distract. I don't know, whatever. But like it's just shoving it down, I guess, basically, and then acting in a way that's more flat. But
Yeah.
to me, that seems to be a rejection of the present moment, rejection of fate, maybe, is your emotions are a major piece of who you are, just like thoughts, right?
Yeah. And I think how it came to be that way was that the Stoics recognized that oftentimes your emotions are like the clouds. They just come, you feel that
Yeah.
emotion, and then you wait 20, 30 minutes and you're feeling a different emotion. And so they understood that emotions are there in their cloud of judgment. And so when something is happening and most people would be, highly reactive, and a Stoic is going, okay, let me feel this emotion and let me choose my response rather than just reacting immediately. Then people would be like, what? You don't have an emotion? It's like, no, I feel the emotion, but I'm not reactive to it.
Yeah.
I'm taking a breather, I'm taking a beat and going, what's going to be most helpful here so that I don't do something destructive. And so over
Realistically,
time,
how does one get to that point, though? I got to interrupt you here, because realistically, how does one get to a point where they can take that breath and actually think through something and execute a different behavior? Like, that's not easy.
no, it's not. I think the problem with most people when they kind of start trying to walk down that path of being able to pause and take that breather is that they only practice in moments that are really hard. They if they're constantly fighting with their partner, they only practice
Yeah.
trying to have that beat when they're
In
in the
the
heat of the
crisis.
moment,
Yeah.
which is when
Yeah.
it's exactly. And so it's really hard. But it's like, think about it. Firemen don't train in the fire. They train before the fire. So when the fire
I like
happens, they know
that.
exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Just when, and that's why allowing yourself that space just to be bored and other things like that, you get to know your own mind and you pay attention to that. Like meditation, just being present, just stopping every now and then and go, what's going on in my head right now? Let me think about this. And journaling is the same thing. It's about becoming so aware of what's going on in your mind. Excuse me, what's going on in your mind, that you're naturally in tune with the thoughts, the stories, the emotions. And so it's really about grounding yourself so that when things are easy, so that when things are harder, you can go, okay, I'm doing the same thing. What are the thoughts? Because you're comfortable with that. So one exercise that I did probably about 5, 6 years ago, I got this from Naval Ravikant, was I did 60 days of meditation for 60 minutes each day.
Whoa.
And yeah, it was it was hard. But what I found was that it actually shifted things. It gave my brain space to kind of rewire how a lot of things happened that I feel is very permanent. My base level daily anxiety level went down by quite a bit. But I also got comfortable in my own thinking because it was a very simple thing. I would just sit down, I'd put on some very kind of like drone music in the background. It was just low and almost hypnotic in a way. And then I would just sit quietly with my eyes closed and just focus on my breathing. And when I noticed I wasn't focusing on my breathing anymore, I'd go, oh, there's a thought that I had. That's an interesting thought. Catalog it, just notice it, and then come back to breathing again. And so the whole point of meditation isn't to clear your mind, it's to
Mm.
consistently bring your focus back to breathing.
Mm.
Bring your focus back to breathing after paying attention to what you just saw. And so you get more comfortable
Mm.
with the way that your mind works because you're consistently observing, oh, there's the thought I had.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting, and bring it back.
Yeah. All these pieces you're listing, this is exactly what I do with in my community. Like this morning, we did a group. We did 3 meditations. One of them was just simple mindfulness, just connecting to the present moment. What do you see? What do you hear? How's your body naturally breathing? And the second one, we call it anchoring into safety, where you're doing the simple mindfulness and then paying more attention to like one piece of the environment, like how does your AirPods case feel texture wise, the smoothness of it, blah blah blah. And then you notice, well, how does that feel in the body? How does your breathing change naturally? And then there's the third one, the third meditation, we built on the first two, and then we actually invite discomfort. We invite something maybe you're just kind of carrying around with you, or something you should pay attention to but you haven't been, or maybe something coming up like a doctor's appointment that you feel anxious about. But we don't wait until the doctor's appointment and then say, well, what the hell do I do about it? It's like, let's pay attention to it now when you're grounded in what we call safety, when you're grounded in the present moment. then pay attention to, well, what else do you have inside of you that needs your attention? And I have found personally, I have found in the client work and all that, like it just does wonders when we like, just like you said, when we pay attention before before the crisis. You don't wait for the fire.
Yeah.
You say, well, how do I put out the fire? That's the hardest time to do it.
Yeah. And that's what premeditatio malorum is about. It's about imagining the worst when you're in the safe place so that when the worst happens, you've already thought about how you want to prepare for that. So
Well,
yeah, what you were describing is exactly that.
yeah. To me, in what we do, it's not just about how do I want to, what behavior do I want to execute in response to this thing in the future. But when we practice it now, we're actually exposing ourselves to the emotion. Yeah. And
Exactly.
so, and you can feel that in the body. And then when you do that,
Hmm.
when you're grounded and can balance out with the present moment, then when it comes time and that thing does happen, you're like, I've experienced this before. Your body, you don't have to think it through. Your body's like, we've been here before. We can handle this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're preparing for a hard conversation, but
Yeah.
you can do so with with a lower level of anxiety. You can go like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to probably feel this because they're probably going to say this. Okay. And it's kind of like inoculating yourself to it. It's
That's,
like,
that's crazy. That's exactly the word I use. Yeah. Yeah. You're giving yourself a
yeah,
dose of it
because
ahead of
you're like,
time.
yeah, you give yourself a little bit of this anxiety, like, okay, they're going to probably say this, and I
Right.
know I'm probably going to feel like this. Okay, okay, so I've got that. Okay, I sense that feeling, and I can step through this. And so when that does happen, and yes, the level is probably going to be a bit higher in the moment,
Yeah.
but again, you're used to that feeling a little bit, and the more you practice that, then the easier it is.
So loving your fate, I think we kind of agreed it's maybe a place to get to, but also there's some technique components to it.
Yeah, I would say that it's really about looking at everything. And this is where kind of the idea of the obstacle is the way, or what Marcus Aurelius said, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And people hear that and they're like, well, that's paradoxical. And that's the obstacle. How can it be moving itself forward? And it's like, you did, since for the Stoics, the whole idea is that the sole good of life is virtue, your character, who you become, the type of person you are. Then anything that is an obstacle in your way is something that helps strengthen virtue. It's like going to the gym. If you just go to the gym and you stand there, or you pay somebody else to lift your weights, or you avoid lifting the hard stuff, you're never going to put on any muscle. So
Right.
this is the same way, is that all of these challenges that come are the things that strengthen you. They're the things that show you what you're made of. And it's like years ago, I was on a date. This was probably, I don't know, like 17, 18 years ago. And I'm a cyclist. So I love going out and riding, doing, 40, 50-mile rides and those kind of things, even though I'm really out of shape now. And so I'm getting back into that. But that was one of the things that I love to do. And she asked me, she's like, why would you do that? And I stopped about it for a minute. I'm like, well, one, because when I'm out there, it feels like I'm flying is the best way to describe it. When you see birds just
It's that
flipping around and
freedom. Yeah.
playing,
Yeah.
yeah, that freedom, that's what this feels like, is that I'm under my own power on this lightweight bike and I'm just cruising around and being able to move at these speeds that normal people, when you're walking or running, you can't. But I said, but secondarily, it helps me to find where my edges are. I push my limits and see, okay, this is what I did before. Can I move past that limit? And that obstacle, that thing that's in my way, is the thing that makes me stronger. And so if I avoid all the obstacles in my life, then I don't get very strong.
Do you think that these little adjustments in behavior, finding the edge, pushing further, these little adjustments in finding the edge of your emotion, pushing further, these little challenges in addressing your thoughts, the way you think about things by maybe ahead of time saying, this is true about me, I am selfish, maybe, and then recognizing it as it shows up, all these different avenues that we're talking about, do you feel like, or do you think that this is how you embrace your fate, your life, your future, your present?
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I think that it's hard because we want everything to be so systematized,
Yeah.
and because we're squishy beings, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's And that's what I love about, Stoic practice is that it's a lot of practices. It's a lot of principles, but there's not like one giant overarching thing. It's all of these little things that you bring to bear. It's like the dichotomy of control. Look, what can you control and what can't you control? A very simple question and a very simple idea that can lead to a very deep understanding of a problem, where you can really look at it and go, wow, what can I control in this? And me and my partner are really struggling, and I keep trying to control her behavior, and I keep trying to control what she says, and that's not something I can control. Okay, let me figure out how to step back on that. Um, so it's these simple filters on things that lead to very complex ideas. They all come together, and sometimes, like a I guess a web or a net, and they're all stronger in different things, but you use different ones at different times, or in combination. So it's not quite this checklist of like, oop, did that, did that, did that. Although that's not a bad way to start off. It's like, am I acting wise in this situation? Am I acting just? Am I acting with courage? Am I acting with temperance? So I think it's just a number of principles that need to be applied rather than something dogmatic. And I think that's why a lot of people flock to like religion or fall into cults or other things like that, is because there's this prescriptive nature of things. Like, if you do X, Y, and Z, you will go to heaven. If you do X, Y, and Z, you are a good person. Whereas tools like this are much more squishy and like, okay, are you being wise? Well, you've got to judge whether you're being wise or not. So you have to develop that discernment over time. And that's where the facing up to the obstacles is important, because how do you know if you're wise if you never make hard decisions? How do you know if you're courageous if you're not facing fear? And so it's in those hard moments and accepting those hard moments and looking at them, like you said, as opportunities, that we're able to actually grow and figure out, oh yeah, I did make a good decision here, or oh crap, I made a crappy decision here, but I can learn from that failure.
Is there a goal though, with all these squishy web interventions that one could use? Is there a goal? Is there an endpoint, or is there a target, or is it just to become more virtuous? Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, it really is just to improve the quality of your life, so that when hard times happen, that you're able to handle them better. You're able to handle them in ways that benefit you,
Yeah, but
excuse me, and the
they
people
can't, they
around you.
can't mean like financially improve your life. I don't think that's what, right? So
For sure.
okay, so
I mean, in a way they can. I mean, because
okay,
people who are more virtuous are going to make better decisions. They're going to have better relationships
okay.
because they treat others better. They're going to be more balanced and not burn out because they're practicing temperance. So it does have practical effects as well as emotional and relational effects all around. And it also just increases your happiness and your mood, because you are taking care of those things. You're aware of those things. You can manage those things. When something bad happens, or that you judge to be bad, because the Stoics are like, nothing's either good or bad. It's thinking makes it so. When something happens that you dislike, that's against your preferences, or you know, that you would prefer not to happen, you can go, okay, it happened. I can sit and complain about it, or I can do something about it. So you wallow a lot less as well.
No, totally. What I'm hearing is that once you get to that point of virtuosity, that the natural effects would be improvements, or what we would deem to be improvements in relationship and well-being, financial well-being, healthcare, all just benefits pretty much in every domain of life once. But that middle point of living in alignment with reality, with virtuousness, that's kind of central to everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one idea that, what you mentioned there, and this for me, what Amor Fati was about is it's just accepting reality for what it is. I mean, that's really what it comes down to in a pure nutshell, is that it's looking at it and accepting, yep, this is what happened. And then understanding that your perspective colors how you feel about that thing. So, and it's not just one thing too either. It's looking at the complexity of that. It's the sensations that we feel in our bodies. It's the pre-existing beliefs that we have.
Emotions, yeah.
It's the Yeah, it's the thoughts that we have on top of that that create how we feel about that certain thing, and that's a challenging thing for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around. I mean, it's taken me years to get to that, where I understand that complexity and then actually implement it. And oftentimes, I'll be frustrated or anxious about something, and I'll be like, okay, you take a breather,
That breath, yeah.
work through what's going on in my head, and pay attention to those things. And it's always an ongoing practice. And once
It
you kind of
is.
get a little bit good at it, then you recognize how terrible you actually are at it, how much better you could be at it. And so, I don't think there's ever a destination. It's always just an ongoing thing of, did I handle this a little better than I did last time?
I
And if not,
what could go better? Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I don't think we're ever quite done in the stuff that I'm doing and teaching. It's not like an endpoint. I would call it, as far as my focus would be, are we at a place of regulation? And regulation can include discomfort, just not out of control. That would be
yeah.
dysregulated. Panic would be dysregulation. Feeling anxiety or worry, that's okay. It's you can regulate and have that emotion. To me, that's the goal: is how do we maintain a level of regulation, which I think definitely would fit in with Stoic thinking as well, or Stoic being.
Oh, absolutely. And I like one of the things you mentioned there. It's about being able to sit in that discomfort.
Yeah.
And the greater your capacity is to sit in discomfort of something without getting out of balance, getting dysregulated, that's a lot of strength. That's a lot of power. And we need more people who are like that. That when the world is going crazy around them, that they can sit in this discomfort and hold that. That's an incredible amount of strength, rather than shutting it off because it's too painful, that they can sit in that discomfort and they can be like, whew, I'm not happy about this, but I'm not going to lose my cool about this, and maintain control. That to me is a lot of strength. And that's something that I've worked towards, because I used to be much more hot-headed about so many things. And it's taken me a lot of years to get to where I'm not nearly like that. And there's still times where I'm frustrated and anxious, for sure. But overall, decreasing that and being able to sit with that discomfort rather than trying to shut it off, I think is a really big thing. And that's why we have all these distractions: phones, drugs, alcohol, all of those type of things, because we don't like that discomfort. So we're like, oh, let's numb that discomfort. And the better you can sit with it, better your life will
100%.
be.
To be the word you used, strength, I definitely agree. That is strength, is to be able to acknowledge what is true emotionally and in your sensations and your thoughts, just to acknowledge it and let it be without rejecting it. To me, that's rejecting reality, the present moment. And it's the opposite, I think, of what we typically hear from anybody and everybody in the wellness space included, is how do you get rid of how you feel? And really, I think it's the opposite, which is how do you embrace it compassionately and let it be, and let yourself process it and take it where it needs to take you, without spiraling into behaviors that you're going to regret later on, of course. Yeah, to me, that's strength.
I mean, like I said, I think for me, a lot of it is when I feel overwhelmed like that, I try to, hold that image of, like I said, a kayaker or a big wave surfer, that rather than resisting the wave that's coming,
Yeah.
figure out how you can ride that wave. And that emotional energy can actually be incredibly powerful and move things in a really good direction if you direct it. And it's not about, tamping the wave down and pretending it doesn't exist. It's, how do I ride this wave in a way that is going to propel me forward in a really healthy way?
You're really good with the metaphors and analogies. Like, this is great stuff. Erick, thank you so much for coming on to Stuck Not Broken. Dear listener, please, if you are into Stoicism or if it intrigues you, I highly recommend Stoic Coffee Break, which is Erick's podcast. It is the only Stoicism podcast I listen to right now. I like it a lot. He does a great job of breaking down the Stoicism teachings and applying it to your life. He has a book out that I also highly recommend. It's called Stoicism 101. It is a great resource for the foundational pieces of Stoicism. He also does a program called Build an Unbreakable Mind, which runs every 2 months. I will leave a link to Erick in the description. Please give him more of your time and attention. He does a great job. And also, dear listener, thank you so much for spending some time with Erick and I here on Stuck Not Broken.